Yes, hello, welcome everyone. Happy Sunday. This is Mihai Algiu, and this is my dear friend and guest for this talk, Mellie Logan. Welcome, Mellie. Um, yeah, this is part of this ongoing series of talks, this umbrella of psychotherapy and non-duality. And also, from my understanding, my point of view on psychotherapy is not the regular talk psychotherapy, but awareness-based somatic psychotherapy. Um, and so these talks that I had with various people, teachers, guides, counselors, wise men or women, are to go and explore dialogue on this intersection between the need of doing a thorough work, like spiritual awareness-based self-inquiry, witnessing, meditation, transcendental kind of work. At the same time, the need of doing this, let's say, called personal embodiment, processing of wounds, and so the need of doing both. And so, all right, so I met Mellie. I just give a little introduction and I'll give you the floor, Mellie. But I met Mellie in the Hakomi Institute trainings, which is a wonderful awareness-based somatic modality I recommend to everybody. And we were peers studying there, and we became friends. It was like 7-8 years ago. And why I come to you now, I want to have this talk today on focusing on this, the attachment wounds, attachment trauma, the healing of it, what it means, how to go about it, which is, from what I understand, some of the more pernicious kind of imprints. So I remember, I remember that you were telling me, I don't know, 8 years ago, speaking about embodiment, the need of coming back from awareness, transcendental, la la land, to, to kind of in the body and all of this stuff. And I was looking at you more like a, huh? I was kind of new information for me at that time. And also you were telling me about trauma, attachment wound, this or that. And I was like, again, like one of those dogs, you're like, huh? So anyway, meanwhile, I went on a therapeutic path and I did a lot of inner work, caught up with some of the things you were saying. And I know for sure that you went deeper with your understanding and your work. So in my field lately comes this, all right, I want to look more into this. I want to do events, workshops, trainings about this based on seeing how much suffering this brought in my life and how it's not personal. It's kind of universal pattern of wounding. So I thought, okay, who I can talk to, get some deep download. And then you came as my first candidate. So I'm very grateful for our time in the past. And I would like to pick your brains, Mellie.
Great. happy to have them picked.
Yeah.
That's sweet. Yeah, thanks. I'm glad that somehow planted a seed is what it sounds like, that like whatever it was I said in those years, that it's stuck with you. So
can you share a little bit about your this can become a whole interview or 2 parts, but a little bit of your journey of healing or awakening, and yeah, if you can share a little bit about this, and especially give me a little bit from this area of relationship or the pain of relationships as a catalyst for growth and of change and transformation, healing. Anything so that the viewers can know a little bit more about you?
Yeah, I mean, where to start? It's been a long journey, but essentially, I grew up in a situation that had violence and alcoholism and domestic abuse, right? So I mean, I didn't really understand any of that until I got much older, because as a child, you don't know anything better, right? Like, this is what life was, and I learned to survive it. So I also, I think, had a very strong will that is part of what's moved me in my life to find out and investigate and work through what that early life situation did to me. Because, it certainly provided, my parents did what they could. And I didn't grow up in poverty. So that's, one plus.
Mhm.
And I grew up as a white woman in America. So that's, a major plus in many ways in this world. It's a lot of privilege. But the anger and rage of my father, that was taken out on and done, he expressed that in our house on an ongoing, I don't know if it was daily, but it was certainly, regular basis for years. And my mother, was harmed by him physically, and I had to witness that. And as I got older, um, I didn't collapse. Like, I have a brother who, for him, I think in a very young age, it just scared the shit out of him and he went away. Right. So if we think about attachment theory, we can get into that a little bit more a little later. He has a different attachment style than I have. So for me, I was vocal and spoke up and expressed my distress in the situation, was looking for help.
Mhm.
And eventually, even went into protection mode of my mother, right, after watching this for so many years. So, I left when I was 20, and my parents thankfully broke up, and I went out into the world, and I just felt disconnected for decades. I mean, I
Mm.
didn't know that. I just, but I was like, I didn't sleep well. I was addicted to pot. I was bulimic. I had coping mechanisms that weren't really in any way super supportive. And yet I saw that other people had what seemed like healthy, loving relationships, or certainly more connection with their family. And when I moved to California was when I got connected with some women who really became my spiritual community. And I started to learn and study really about spiritual principles. The very first spiritual teacher I had, who is a friend of mine today, taught me about chakras and auras, and working with my energy system and how to ground and how to not be so porous. And it started to change my orientation to my body and to my beingness. So for years then I went into spiritual study, whatever that means. But like, I had a teacher who her teachers had come through an Advaita Vedanta
Mhm.
lineage. And, I learned that word and sort of the meaning of it in the early mid 90s.
Hmm.
But not from just a intellectual point of view, but this woman was highly talented at transmitting, you know,
Mhm.
some spiritual.
You're talking about Amoda Ma or someone else?
No, her name is Leslie Temple Thurston. She
Mhm.
she lives in Santa Fe. She was highly articulate of the non-dual experience, as well as transmitting darshan or light, right? So we would sit in meditation for hours,
Mhm.
and weeks sometimes, in retreat. And my consciousness started to change. I started to have expanded experiences. I started to have had some experiences where, it's like my sense of ego or self collapsed, and I felt, connected in a much bigger way. And so that was my view into that there's something else going on in life that
Mhm.
I had no idea about. And I really kind of got there by accident. Like I wasn't searching per se, but then when I got a taste of it, I pretty much gave my whole self to it for many, many years. And it, transformed my consciousness. I studied astrology. I studied everything I could get my hands on
Hmm.
as far as, um, kind of spiritual teachings, but also then what astrology did for me is it brought in the psychology.
Hmm.
When I started to learn astrology, there was something, and I had dabbled in it in high school. It had given me a sense of like, when I read about what a Scorpio was, like, it was like, oh, like it touched something in me. But when I studied it in depth, what I saw was that there was a psychological model here
Hmm.
that then years later, which started a bit before I got into Hakomi, but certainly Hakomi was kind of cinched it for me, was that, wow, okay, so there's this whole spiritual reality, which, had helped me kind of transcend some of the wounding and pain that I had been in, was able to stop smoking pot and stopped being bulimic. And, and that was also a lot of personal work. But when I started really studying psychology, I saw the roots of some of the wounding. And the spiritual work helped me to see things in a perspective that, like, okay, maybe at some level I chose this life and somehow this is my karma. Like, I needed to come here, or I chose to come here and to experience this wounding. But the psychological perspective, I don't know if it answered why, but it certainly helped me. Like when I saw, okay, so because of my childhood and because of the conditioning, this is what happened. And then really when I studied attachment theory with Julie in Hakomi, something really clicked for me where I deeply, and that's child development there. So when we kind of understand the development of the beingness and how in optimum, kind of experience, a healthy self-esteem and a healthy sense of self and sense of confidence can come out of that. But when we're neglected and or abused or both, that there's so much that we have to compensate for, and so much goes undeveloped in our potential. And that was fascinating. Like, that's then become, in these last 15 years, become like a fascination for me. Just like, I love it. Like, it's something that, whether it's true or it's not true, or it's all of the picture, that's besides the point. It's just like, I love the psychology of humans. We're fascinating, amazing beings. And, that in itself is a study, right? That's the study of psychology. So
Yeah, thank you. And I can see this, the pattern of evolutionary. There are several patterns of paths, but can see that for you, there's a suffering in childhood, trauma, and then you go into spirituality and transcendental, God, non-duality, that brings some relief, some answers, something. And then actually what I appreciate when I met you, somehow I think when I met you, you're already coming back now and bringing the psychology, somatic psychology, psychotherapy, processing. So not just to neti your way out of some pain body,
right,
but yeah, having the resource of presence, non-dual presence, but then coming back and processing this stuff. Yeah, I remember you were telling me first time about this embodiment. It was like, what is that? But yeah, in order to not oscillate, like I got it, I lost it. It's not to go to more satsangs or get more darshan or meditate more hours, but to process some of the stuff where we have, all this unprocessed stuff. It's the sense of, they call it in Advaita, the me feeling. The me feeling, the sense of separation in the body is connected to unprocessed stuff. So I can see your journey like that, and then going also knowing you in everywhere, basically, where you found something juicy and yummy spiritually. And then I think you introduced me, or I had the chance to, you introduced this lady Amada Ma, who I still appreciate her, and she came to my town here.
right, yeah.
Also this the use of psychedelic intentional psychotherapy. You were exposed to that, and then somehow later I found how beneficial it was to, because these traumas, especially attachment traumas and early childhood stuff like that, they are often sometimes non-verbal and they are deeply repressed. They may never come up. So
Right.
they come up, the aftermath of them comes up. So I could see that this going to more satsangs, it will just keep it there, at least for me. And these journeys, they undone the repression a little bit. So this yucky sense of aloneness or unworthiness or whatever starts to come out of the basement. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and just how it was told to me again by this woman who was kind of my first introduction. Her name is Darla. Is that, like, you know, if we think of the body as the vessel, right? Like if there's a crack in the vessel, then the light can't be held, right? So the wounding is sort of like the cracks, and so like the shoring up or the fortifying of the vessel is sort of the healing process, so that we can hold that non-dual, that experience that we're connected to something greater than us. So we can hold that in our consciousness, maybe not every second of every day, but like I can hold it more and more and more as I go, right? And so that when I do get triggered, when I am hurting or, you know, something happens, I can get back there more quickly. It used to be days or months, right? And now it's more like hours, you know. To hold that light in the vessel of the body is how I would say that.
So let's get into this topic, and I know you want to, yeah. So what I was interested in to talk about a little bit theoretically and also practically what to do about it, about this so-called attachment wound, attachment trauma, which is something connected to early childhood. A child ideally needs love and attention and the parent to be attuned to them, to feel them, see them in some loop of attunement, and then the connection is safe and stable, and so ideally that's what we need, but this is rare, I think, when it happens. So there's many people, they experience something else, like father leaves or mother leaves, or father is strung out on substances or is abusive or is traumatized himself from the war. Anyway, so there are many kind of types of life patterning that create a certain hurt in the child in early stages. And this can be one time, but often I think attachment trauma is more like developmental, many times, many little cuts throughout many years. And where the aftermath of it is that not only that the child may develop some strong deficiency story, like trying to interpret what happened as, oh, that it was like that because I must be unworthy or unlovable or something wrong with me. This stuff everybody gets, no matter what happens. But it's something about not trusting the connection, not trusting love, or creating some weird dynamics of, oh, don't go, don't come too close, don't, this so-called attachment style. So I'm really interested to get into that. And so you thought it might be helpful to give a little brief outline of attachment theory. Yeah, so if you can take it from here and share anything might be useful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in attachment theory, but I have studied it, and what I find useful, I'll share what I find useful from it, which is that if we think about this attachment system, it's like a system in our body, right? And that it's developed. They say that it's developed by the time we're about 18 months old. And what it is it's a system for detecting threat, right? Because attachment is about safety, right? And at its core, when we come in as babies, ideally we come into a safe environment, right? And so then we learn over time that when we're scared, we attach, we go find mom, right? Like, right? There's some kind of thing that or we get too far away, we come back, right? So there's a way that we seek safety.
Mm.
Attachment system is about how we seek
Mm-hmm.
safety. And if there's secure attachment, we will seek proximity. We will seek that caregiver's support, help, warmth, whatever it is.
Mm.
When there's attachment disruption, we could just call it, which can be trauma, wounding, but disruption in that development of the secure attachment system, when there's a disruption in that, then the ability to seek safety goes awry in a variety of ways. And I think it's kind of a bit of on a continuum. That's my own personal feeling about it, that it's not just one way or another, because we have different, most of us have one or two caregivers, whether they be, our actual parents or not, or teachers or, influences from adults in our early life. And we can be afraid of one and super needy of the other, right? Like this is the experience. So I was talking about my brother earlier and how, the trauma that we grew up in really, like, it made him pull away and shut down and like not seek proximity at all. Right? So we could call that, classically they call it an avoidant attachment style.
So if you won't trust, feels unsafe, and then avoids closeness.
Yeah, and isn't even in touch with, avoidance is really about not knowing. It's like not in touch with that we would need proximity. We don't even know that we feel unsafe, right? Like it's so Julie would call it deactivated attachment, a deactivated attachment style. So that need to seek proximity is not online.
Yeah.
So it's just like deeply unconscious, and even maybe, it's like there's so much unsafety in the environment that you're just like, boom, done. Right. And then for me, for whatever reason, I did get some attachment to my mother. There was definitely a way that I was really attached to her, but she was so preoccupied with what was going on in the environment with my dad that it was intermittent. And so that created a hyper stimulation, or certainly supported a hyper stimulation in my system, which I might have had a propensity toward anyway. And so that
some kind of clingy, anxious, needy. It's a judgmental, but it creates this, instead of avoiding like your brother, you're more like,
Well, I was, at 5 years old, I was diagnosed with ADHD. In 1970, my teacher said I had a hard time sitting still. So there was just so much energy in my body. I don't know if it was so needy, but I was disruptive. I had a lot of energy and it was going everywhere. And the teacher noticed that. And I do think that, yes, like I really wanted to be around my mom a lot. And there was never enough, there just wasn't enough of her. And then my father, she left him several times. And, so it just created this environment. Like you said, it's lots of little cuts over time where that more hyperactive, that more overactive system of attachment, it's like you're looking, grabbing, wanting, and it's not coming in. Right. So it's not that you need more, it's that it's like not coming in. So it creates this sense of deficit, or this sense of lack that is, like hyper-stimulating in the system.
So this one also to this energetic, somatic, psychosomatic phenomena of like unmet attunement, I guess, and unmet safety. Also later, the child, I guess, interprets it psychologically, whether it has words or not, but it means something about me. It becomes this kind of, I guess in Hakomi, we call it core material, core limiting programs. It's not just the yuckiness and fear. It's like, what does it mean? Oh, I don't know. I can't get love and attention. I'm not worthy of love. I don't trust. So do you have a sense of what will be the meaning, the subconscious meaning that the system put on the experience?
For me personally, I mean, I think it's, yeah, it's different for different
For you,
people, but
or for you, or generally?
yeah, well, I think
Yeah.
it's what you just said. Like there's some sense of unworthiness at the core of that. For me, I think specifically it was like, I'm not lovable, right? Like I
Mhm,
didn't feel like that was really the place when I worked deeply to heal,
mhm,
was I'd have to feel this pain in my system, and the words there were, I'm not lovable.
mm,
And so, there's some version of that in there for people.
mhm,
I'm not worthy. I'm too much. I'm bad. It,
mhm,
as you said, it's pre-verbal.
mhm,
It's happening in a aspect of our system that's not conscious.
mhm,
And most of the stuff is super. Whether we can speak or not, we certainly can't organize ourselves to understand what's
mhm,
happening. So it is at a pre-verbal
mhm.
level there.
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, there can be other things like, let's say, somebody leaves or somebody dies in
Right.
childhood. So there's, even if it could be a good, stable attachment, but then there's this sudden interruption. This creates a sense of like shocking loss or something like that. This in itself can, so anything to do abandonment, rejection, uh, berating, aggression, anything else,
Criticism. Criticism.
criticism, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
criticism can create, I guess, yeah, a continuum of different flavors of ice cream of this wound, I
Yes.
guess. Yeah, I remember in my case, I had interesting, I had wonderful 6 years where I was totally loved and cared completely and safe. Um, yeah, I don't want to go too much into it now, but so I got a mixture of, hey, I'm seen and loved and safe, but then at the same time I got this, okay, some bond was disrupted. I'm a few months old, and then the bond was disrupted again when I was 6 years old.
Right.
So somehow I didn't develop this thing as something wrong with me, or I'm unworthy or unlovable, because I did get a lot of that, but there was something that I didn't even know much later. It started to play out over and over that it's going to go away somehow. It's going to go
Right.
away. You can't trust. Also, it was playing out for decades at the beginning. I will seek deep closeness and intimacy, and especially was connected to the frontal line. So with like, sex and closeness and body on body, that was giving something that my system needed.
Right.
At the same time, I didn't have the equipment and the emotional intelligence to have emotional bonding, emotional closeness. And so this strong desire for bonding, and at some point out of a blue, I remember many relationships, out of a blue, I'll be like, okay, I'm good, I'm done, it's over. And there was like, what is this? I mean, this is many times happened like this. And
So
then
you were running into material
yeah, I was
and
the
didn't really
material
know it.
was yeah.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Right. That deactivated what we might call, it's like it's so out of consciousness,
Mhm.
right? But it's like it kind of, yeah. It's hard to put into words, but I've
Yeah.
experiencing it myself in my current relationship, where it's like something just, it's like boom, all the love is gone, the heart is closed, or I just can't
Mhm.
feel anymore. And that was suspicious to me, because it's like, wait a minute, that's not my story, that like
Mhm.
I'm now not wanting to be close, or I'm needing more space, or I'm don't want you around. And
Mhm.
that to me is, there's something that we should talk about here, I think, Mihai, because it's important. It's called about neuroception. This is again in attachment theory. Neuroception is the ability to detect threat from the inside, right? Like it's our ability to notice safety or threat, right? It's
Mhm.
like we have these deep experiences in our processes in our nervous system, parts
Yeah.
of our brain that know like in a split second, you hear a noise, right? You're like, ooh, right? There's some part of you that goes on alert, right? So that's called neuroception, the ability to detect threat. And one of the things that happens with attachment disruption is that we have what's called faulty neuroception. So that we could be attracted to situations that are actually unsafe for us, or that are actually, are harmful. And we can also avoid situations that are safe because the wires are crossed internally. And so I think that that's part of what you're saying there. It's like, at some point there was some kind of threat happening. It just like totally took you off. You're like, I'm done. Right. And this is where the rewiring has to happen if we want to be able to let somebody in more deeply, or, open ourselves and attach in places that have been historically cut off, or no way, you're not ever getting in there again. Right? I mean, we do this at these very animal levels, right? Like this is the animal brain, really.
Yeah, I remember actually, as I started to engage in a psychedelic medicine journey on the receiving end, the first time it will come that I was conscious of, it was all, usually this medicine journey, they bring a deep sense of connection and bond. And so this was happening. And then there was wonderful, it was like, I was like soaking it in. And then usually towards the end, or if the person will look away or something, it will be like some shock in my system that it will be triggered like burning in my chest, or some in the frontal line where we have this, you are supposed to be with the mother or father, some burning, shock, anxiety, fear, which was very unpleasant, and I usually was always repressed. It will never come, but it started to come like this, like something is terribly wrong. And I didn't know why was that. And I didn't even know. I mean, and at the beginning I was like, whoa, what is this? All right, let me bring some awareness to it. Let me transcend it. Let me, I was trying to
get away from
squirm
it.
out of it. Yeah. And understand it or whatever.
Yeah.
But it kept coming, and which was nice, because usually this is hidden and drives the bus. So yeah, that was some kind of emotional somatic sensation, which actually was a file. They had a lot of skeletons there, and also they have a meaning, like it's going to go away, it's going to be done, it's going to be over, I don't need it, but I want it, so it's interesting.
Well, right there, right, the ambivalence, that's really such a core, like a hallmark of, of attachment disruption, is I need it, I want it, but no way. There's this push-pull.
Yeah.
That's so strong and confusing, I would say, deeply.
Yeah, for me, it took me long years to realize, okay, so this is avoiding, and I'm trying to avoid, not, this avoid intimacy. Yeah, but like, why? Yeah. Avoid loss. Yeah. So it was about avoiding loss, because there was information in my system early on, which, as a baby, something like that, it's like life-threatening, they say. Right. It's like your system is shut with all of this sensation. And I think as I become a teenager and all of that, I was organized to not feel that. Right. But as I got into spiritual work and better tools that was starting to come up, the idea, the organization was that the same information came of unprocessed loss. And now if relationship is ends, it's not survival, I'm okay. But for the baby, that's, it's right. Very dangerous.
Right. Well, and one of the things you're saying right there is about curiosity, like as an adult, right? As you were having these experiences, I think that that's key right there, is that you got curious. That's how do we shift out of trying to avoid something? Well, that's a good way, is to start to get curious about it. Like, just moving in, if we talk about or think about, so what to do about this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think that cultivating that attitude and having support and help is imperative, right?
Yeah, I mean, for the viewers, or I believe the large majority of the viewers of this video, they already got some understanding of, hey, I need to face this. And they have some kind of willingness beyond curiosity, willingness to face it, and they are trying to get some understanding. So to move it, how, let's say, different cuts, different styles of cuts with different swords in this attachment system realm, it can manifest aftermath as what? Yeah, you know. So let's give some examples of what would be some classic example of the aftermath of this unprocessed trauma and how it plays out from your experience with others. And
A classic example. Well, I mean, I think one of the most simplest ways is that it plays out as projection onto our partners, you know, like that we don't really understand what's happening for us, right? Like, as you were talking about, like, you know, trying to avoid some sort of thing, or feeling engulfed or feeling abandoned, like those are the two things we're trying to avoid feeling. And we don't even really, like, what does abandonment feel like? You know, like it's an abstraction, but we know that we come up against something and it feels like our partner or our friend or whomever, because we have attachment with everybody, right? Not everybody, but the people that we're in relationship with. There's some, you know, to some degree or another, we are attached, or we're in relationship. And so it feels like somebody's hurting us. It feels like, it seems like somebody is doing something to me. And this is the trap here. It's the trap, and the way out is that, you know, your partner says something and ow, you know, and then you want to kill them. You know, you just want to bop them over the head, or you fight back because you don't want them to be saying that because that hurts, right? So then you're in just the classic projective power struggle. Who doesn't know that, right? We do it with our parents, we do it with our siblings, we do it with our lovers, we do it with our children, right?
I see. So yeah, very good point. The unprocessed material, pain body connecting to these things, they are going to attract a certain partner later in life that you have a chance to play this out. And then there will be a trigger, and then you are, in the consciousness point of view, regressed, and that hurt is reactivated. And usually, even if somebody is good being single, spiritual, meditation, this or that, transcendental, is going to God, so good, then you find a good relationship, boom, it's going to bring this up, the material that we thought we forgot.
Yeah, that's unresolved, that's pushing. I mean, intimacy itself, if we think of intimacy, and certainly sexual intimacy, as a container, right? Like two people, you know, are experiencing the deep, you know, yummy parts of each other. That intimacy, that physical, emotional intimacy tends to, I mean, I'm not going to say it always does, but it's my experience in my own life and working with other people that intimacy triggers whatever's in the way of love, whatever's in the way of the attachment. And that has to be worked through if you want to have secure attachment, if you want to be able to feel both your autonomy and your belongingness, right? Because it's both in intimacy. You can't just be fused, and you can't just be separate. You need the flow, and I think that that's where the security comes in, right? You can say I need space, you can say I need connection, you can, find ways to work with whatever the needs are in the relationship. But whose responsibility is it to say what you need in a moment, or to ask for it, or to give it even? And this is where I think there isn't any formula. This is where it would be really great if we had this. And there are people out there. I think Stan Tatkin's work, and certainly Harville Hendricks and the Gottmans, people who do couples work. They have some really great guidelines, right? They have some really great, support systems. But ultimately, when it's you and your partner, it's you and your friend, it's you and the person that you're in conflict with, you have to find your way through it.
Just a moment, Mellie. Yeah, we took a short break, I was contemplating as I was going to the bathroom, like, I think for a long time, it was like when I was in relationship, I felt like I don't want to be in a relationship. I was taking for granted and I was cool and disconnected. And then as soon as the relationship ended, within a few weeks, now something else will activate. It's almost like a different identity. It was crazy making, where it'd be like, oh, I lost her. Oh, she was so wonderful. Oh, I love her so much. What's wrong with me? Then I seek it from this soft, tender, open, vulnerable, also deeply wounded place, which I guess it's the lost child archetype, lost I guess. And then as we got back together, then the other one will come. This was torturous for a long time. And all the time I was not even, and although I was dedicated to awakening and awareness and spiritual work, that's interesting, because my teachers and the methods I was using, they were actually not dealing with that. I was left at my own devices. And I remember it was shocking now when I think about it. I thought that spiritual work, awakening work, and relationship, there's nothing to do with each other. So you can imagine that, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
So coming to the next point here, they say, I don't know who said it, but in these circles, that relational wounds, like attachment wounds, they don't heal on the meditation mat, the monastery, by yourself somewhere. So relational wounds heal relationally. So in order to have a little chance, take a stab at rewiring this, bringing to some harmonious balance, is to be in a container of a relationship. I mean, either with a therapist or a teacher, or becoming parent oneself and giving maybe to the child what we didn't have, or with a partner where you are aligned with. Also, looking back, I can see that I was taking this avoidant thing, or wanting connection but not too close. That was safe for my attachment wound somehow, and it felt good. Yeah, I got this, and I was feeling this spiritual imperturbability, which felt like it's a great sign of spiritual progress, but I was just avoiding all of this. And I could see only when I got into bonded, close relationships, now this will come up, you know?
Which will come up?
Actually the wound, the material will come up. Before it was kept at bay through non-attached, avoidant, don't come too close.
The wound of wanting to be close, the wound, which wound was that? Like how?
Well, I guess the attachment wound, I guess not trusting love, not wanting to get too close in order to not feel loss. The whole thing was a lot of my spirituality was about not to feel and to go somewhere else, to Buddha nature, you know?
Right.
So how, let's say if somebody is hearing this or whatever and realizes, oh man, I have this, man. It created problems forever in my relationships. What to do? What would be some suggestions to actually do something practical about it instead of beating about the bush, repeating, recurring, unfulfilling relationships?
Well, that's $1 million question. But what I can say is that
And I know we have another like maybe 7 minutes, so maybe we'll
it's okay. We can go a little longer. It's fine.
we can also perhaps have another talk later
Yeah.
going into more depth, but I just want to open this up here now.
Yeah. Well, I think just kind of a bit of a synopsis there is that at the core is this, as you mentioned a few times, is this sense of aloneness, right? Like that from very young, we learn to adapt because we're not attuned to in the ways that, in order for secure attachment to happen, parents need to get it right 30% of the time, right? So if the baby is hungry or needs its diaper changed or, is wet, is asleep or whatever, right? Like in the very early life, parents just need to like get it right 30% of the time. And then, so it's this time, so probably the baby's hungry. That's getting it right. And then if they don't get it right, they need to repair, which is, oh, actually, no, the diaper's wet, right? Or it's cold, right? Needs something else. So 30% of the time, good guesswork. And then repairing when it's not the right thing, which, it's a lot of work. That's the work of a parent. Certainly those first few years of the life, when the child can't do anything for itself, can't even move, right? In the first year. So that creates a sense that I'm not alone. That something, somebody, certainly, but also I think something bigger, right? The parent is bigger, but there's a sense of benevolence. I'm wanted. I have needs that are taken care of, and I'm not alone in trying to figure out how to survive. Like, there's not this survival fear and survival rage, that kind of gets developed there. And so I think at the core of what we're needing and wanting as adults in our sense of isolation, that we feel isolated and alone and hopeless, is like, how do we get to feel connected to something else, something greater than us? And for me personally, nature was something that I didn't have a connection to when I was little, but developed that probably in my 30s and 40s through living in different places where nature was strongly I didn't live in concrete. There was a time when I, lived on land and lived in Hawaii, and the elements were something that helped me to understand that there's something bigger going on here. And that's something that is not dependent on somebody else, right? So developing a relationship with the elements or with nature is something that can help. Ultimately, it's not. It's not the relational womb, but we need to feel
surrogate, safe substitute.
Well, it's something that I think helps ground us in the here and now, right? It can help ground us in something bigger. 12-step programs certainly, do also help support that connection to something else, as well as work with, addictive, relational aspects or substances. And then, I think ultimately in partnership, it takes two people who are really committed to working through and working with. And that generally takes support. Like if there's I have a couple that I work with, and one of them has much more secure attachment than the other one. She has a lot, the female, it's a heterosexual couple, and she has a lot more trauma. And she needs more support. She has her own therapist, and we do couples work. And it's not like he doesn't either. He totally needs, but he has a lot of friends. He has more support in his life and has more ability to regulate when things get crazy, get hairy between them. He can stay grounded, he can stay centered more easily than she can. So, it takes if somebody has a lot more, if there's sexual wounding, which is, we could say much more severe, or, severe physical abuse, then yeah, trying to be close to someone who has been so deeply wounded like that takes a lot of support, a lot of safety needs to be created, and that takes somebody like my clients, this woman that I'm talking about, helping her understand that it's ultimately her responsibility. If she wants the kind of closeness that she wants, that she will have to learn how to create that safety for herself. I don't think there's any way, it's both, right? It's certainly, it's our inner relationship, and then it's our external relationships. It's not easy. We live in a world, this culture, American culture, is extremely codependent. It's people are in each, families, they're in each other's business, they're telling everybody what to do, they can't do, we're very codependent as a culture, and highly addicted, So there's a lot of cultural support to be in unhealthy relationships.
Yeah, it's like, it's the default somehow.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah, unhealthy, broken relationship.
Yeah.
I had a thought here. Oh yeah, there's this trap, I think, when we don't have enough psychoeducation understanding about these things, is that it's more like an ignorant interpretation of like, oh well, it didn't work, this relationship, there's something wrong with this partner, so okay, I'm done, I'm going to find the right one, given the seeking of the one, or seeking of the next one, which comes from not realizing that, well, something in me attracted this pattern to have this experience, that it plays out the childhood dynamic and stuff like that. So it's very wise at some point to stop, and then to realize that the common element of these relationships is me, and somehow to start to go inside and identify, do some thorough awareness-based somatic work, to work with this with a therapist, or with a guide, or with a teacher, somehow not expecting that the next one now is going to be better, and the next one is going to bring me the happiness I seek. That's a big obstacle to actually healing this, because the next one is not going to bring me the happiness I seek. And so if I don't do some work before the next one, this kind of is going to repeat.
Right. In one way or another.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems like it seems that is really most people's experience.
And I'm not saying this in order for me or you to get clients, because both you and me are very busy and full. But this is, I think, attachment wounds and this stuff like that, it's no way you can heal it from books and self-help, or going to some Zen thing, which I love Zen. I love Zen,
Right.
or
But that's not what it's about, right?
Yeah, it's not what it is about, and it needs to be, I guess, working with a therapist who is trauma-informed and awareness-based somatic. That's a safe container now for this can of worms to open up in a safe container, so one can actually, this will play out to the therapist for sure, like, oh, you are not a good client enough, you don't like me, oh, you are criticizing me. So the same thing may play up as, transference, transference with the therapist, and it's a safe container. So one can, I guess they would say, develop at least one, it seems like the part of the healing is to have at least one healthy, attuned connection, which will offer the, how how to call that, the model for future ones, you know?
Yeah, what they call it is earned secure attachment, that we can earn secure attachment in our lives. And so having somebody act as a healthy attachment figure, right? Like you said, a teacher or a guide, a mentor, a therapist, somebody who has some know-how or some,
Yeah.
awareness of these dynamics that we internalize. Because what happens in with attachment is that we internalize the parent, either in a disorganized, kind of insecure attachment way, or with secure attachment. We internalize that relationship. And so I think this speaks to what you're saying here about like how we heal it. It is a relational wound, and so therefore it needs to be healed in relationship, because we cannot, this is proven, this is not me making this up, what they've shown in studies is that in order to integrate kind of ever deepening trauma in our system, we need another nervous system to hold space so that we can kind of go through whatever we go through, and we can connect with that steady state, right? And that's what we would have had as children, is that steady state, so we can, and then come back home. So that is the providing experience that we are needing, is that we then internalize that guide, that person.
Yeah, which is, I guess, a scientific explanation of this so-called the transmission. And not just the transmission of Ramana Maharishi, but like, somebody's free in their body and relaxed. There's a transmission of that. Somebody's authentic and real. It's a transmission of that. Somebody's open. So the same, there's some transmission happening with a wise therapist who has done their work. And I guess in Hakomi, they had this term, I really appreciate it. Part of the healing is to have the missing experience, what we needed and we didn't have. So I guess in the attachment wound, I guess, would be to have the missing experience with someone, a little bit of, okay, it's safe to be open, or I can rest in the togetherness, or.
Well, to know that somebody's there. I mean, what happens for me is that, like, when I'm in distress, I often hear my therapist's words in my head, or I will connect with, like, I'll have a dialogue with her internally, and kind of imagine what she might say to me, or even just feel her presence. Like, I know that I could reach out to her, that she's there, right? Like, she might not be available to me 24 hours a day, but were I to reach out and need to have some kind of connection with her, I could have that. And that's what we start to internalize, that somebody cares, somebody's paying attention, somebody's available. And eventually that becomes us, that ultimately we cannot be left, because we are always with ourselves. And so there is this adult presence that we build more and more of our, we're more and more attached to our adult presence. We're more identified with some more witnessed adult experience that then can allow all of that other stuff to be happening without it really being real, without it being, it's not really real. It's something that we need to feel this, we need to go through this, and it's not the whole story. And that's the non-dual, presence.
Yeah. I like how you put it, rather than, okay, well, this is yucky and dangerous and I don't want to feel it, so I'm going to meditate a lot to transcend and reach the place of safety, which is possible, but it's not going to last. Instead of doing that, somehow to develop some ability to be resourced in awareness or presence, and face those things in loving awareness and with someone, and gradually, I guess, there will be a natural de-identification. My identity is not going to be in the distressed, lost child sensation and thoughts. The lost child sensation and thoughts may still arise sometimes, but I'm not it. Well, not in a way to bypass it, but because I already processed some of them, and some de-identification happened a little bit, and may continue. and there'll be many cycles, you know.
Once you get a taste of that, that can grow, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we are coming to the end of your time here, and I will talk to you. I would love to. I think we scratch the surface, and I would like to have some more if you're available in the future to talk about this. But if you can just share briefly, you know, if people are somehow, they're like, man, I like Mellie, I want to work with her in some way. Can you share, what you are doing, and where can people find you? And also, I will put your site here, but can you just share?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm working in private, you know, practice one-on-one and with couples, and you can always reach out. Email is the best. You can contact me via email on my website. That's the best way to get a hold of me and inquire. And, you know, I have, at this moment, I have a waiting list, and it's kind of par for the course for most of us in this industry and kind of what's happening in the world. I don't know. But I am looking into doing more group work and or, you know, kind of offerings in more of a bigger way at some point. So
okay. And you know, just because maybe it might not have come here so much, but you know, I was really impressed with Mellie because she, long time ago, I guess years ago for me, she was playing the field in these two realms that are so necessary. So this kind of deep spiritual understanding connected to non-duality, Advaita Vedanta, Zen, Buddhism. So awareness, transcendental aspect of work, which I feel it's essential, as well as this embodied trauma processing, getting into the nitty-gritty, into the can of worms. And at the same time, you know, I know you are like also very intuitive, and you have different offerings, and also experiencing this, having experience in the psychedelic realm. So I find, actually, I remember when my father passed and I felt my mother needed support, I needed to find somebody very wise and good for my mom. So I found Mellie. So I trusted with my mom, and all right.
Thank you.
All right, Mellie. Thank you. Stay in touch.
Thank you, Mihai. All right, we'll be in touch. Yeah.
Yeah.